The woman who stepped off the afternoon stage in Deming, New Mexico, wore black from neck to toe, but it was the veil that made people stare. It hung like a shroud over her face, thick enough that not even her eyes were visible through the dark fabric. And as she stood on the dusty street in the blazing heat of August 1882, children stopped their games to gawk and women whispered behind gloved hands. She carried only a small leather case, her posture rigid as iron, and when the stage driver offered to help her with her luggage, she shook her head without speaking and walked toward the hotel with measured steps that suggested she had walked through far worse scrutiny than this. Lucas Finnegan watched from the shade of the saloon's porch, his hat tipped low against the sun. He had been in Deming for 3 months now, working as a horse breaker for the nearby ranches, and in that time he had seen plenty of unusual sights. The town sat on the Southern Pacific Railroad line, a rough junction point where miners, ranchers, cowboys, and drifters all mixed together in a chaotic blend of ambition and desperation. But this woman was different. There was something in the way she held herself, proud despite the veil, that caught his attention and would not let go. He was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with dark hair that curled at his collar and gray eyes that missed very little. His hands were calloused from rope and reins, and his face was weathered by sun and wind. But there was a gentleness in his manner that horses responded to, and people trusted. He had drifted west from Missouri after his father died, leaving behind a small farm that held too many memories and not enough future. New Mexico suited him. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, the work was honest, and no one asked too many questions about where you came from or why. The veiled woman disappeared into the hotel, and Lucas went back to his drink. But that evening, when he was eating supper at the boarding house where he rented a room, the landlady, Mrs. Chen, told him about their new guest. "Her name is Sophia Anderson, Mrs. Chen said, setting down a plate of beef and beans. "She is taking the room at the end of the hall, paid for a month in advance, cash money, did not say where she came from or what brings her here. Plenty of folks come through Deming without explaining themselves," Lucas said mildly. Mrs. Chen, a practical woman who had come to New Mexico from San Francisco 20 years earlier, gave him a sharp look. "This one is different. Did you see that veil? I asked if she needed anything, if she was in mourning perhaps, and she just shook her head. Her voice was barely a whisper. Something terrible must have happened to her." Lucas did not reply, but that night he lay awake in his narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the town settling down for sleep. Somewhere down the hall, Sophia Anderson was also lying awake, he imagined, still hidden behind that black veil even in the privacy of darkness. The next morning, Lucas was hired to break a string of horses that had come up from Mexico, wild and quick and full of fire. It was dangerous work that required all his attention, and by the time the sun was directly overhead, he had forgotten about the mysterious woman. He was in the corral, working with a particularly stubborn gray mare, when he heard a soft gasp from the fence. He turned and saw her standing there, the black veil still covering her face, her hands gripping the top rail of the fence. She wore the same black dress, high-necked and long-sleeved despite the heat, and she stood very still as she watched him work. Lucas touched his hat in greeting. "Morning, madam." She did not respond, but she did not leave either. After a moment, Lucas returned his attention to the mare, speaking to her in the low, calm voice that had gentled dozens of horses before her. He could feel the woman watching, and it made him more careful, more deliberate in his movements. The mare finally allowed him to approach, to run his hands along her neck and shoulder, to slip a halter over her head without drama. When he looked back at the fence, the woman was gone. But she returned the next day and the day after that. Always silent, always veiled, always watching from the same spot at the fence. Lucas found himself talking more than usual as he worked, partly to the horses and partly to her, though she never responded. He told the horses about the weather, about the land, about the tricks he had learned from an old vaquero down in Texas. And gradually, he began to notice small things about the woman, the way her hands relaxed on the fence rail as she watched, the slight tilt of her head that suggested she was listening carefully, the fact that she always came in the morning when the light was softer and the town was quieter. On the fourth day, he walked over to the fence when he finished with the horses. Up close, he could see that the veil was made of fine black silk, expertly sewn. Her hands on the fence rail were small and well-shaped, though he could see old scars on the backs of her fingers, white lines against pale skin. "I am Lucas Finnegan," he said quietly. "I have noticed you watching." "Do you like horses?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice so soft he had to lean closer to hear it, she whispered, "They are beautiful." "Yes, madam, they are," he agreed. "Would you like to come closer? This mare here, she is gentle now. You could touch her if you wanted." He saw her hands tighten on the rail, saw the quick rise and fall of her chest that suggested sudden fear. "No," she whispered. "Thank you, but no." "All right," Lucas said easily. "But you are welcome to watch any time you like. I am here most mornings." Over the following weeks, a strange sort of companionship developed. Sophia came every morning without fail, and Lucas worked the horses while telling her stories about his life. He told her about growing up on the farm in Missouri, about his mother who had died when he was 12, about his father who had taught him to respect animals and treat them with kindness. He told her about the trail drives he had worked, about the cattle towns and the range wars, about the time he had seen a lightning storm sweep across the plains like the hand of God. And slowly, carefully, Sophia began to talk back. At first, it was only a word or two, whispered responses to his questions. But as the days passed, she spoke more freely, though always in that soft voice that made him move closer to hear. She told him she was from Boston, that she had come west because she needed to leave her old life behind. She did not say why, and Lucas did not press. She told him she liked the desert, the way it stretched out endlessly in all directions, the way the mountains rose up purple and distant on the horizon. She told him she had never seen horses work the way he worked them, with patience instead of force. "My father kept horses," she said one morning, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been nostalgia or might have been pain. "Carriage horses in the city. They were kept in stables and only brought out to pull the family coach. I used to sneak down to the stables when I was a girl and feed them apples. The groom would scold me, but I could not stay away." "What happened to your father?" Lucas asked. There was a long silence. "Then he died. 3 years ago. My mother followed him 6 months later. I was alone after that." Lucas wanted to ask about the veil, about the scars on her hands, about what had driven her to hide herself away in a dusty New Mexico town. But he held his tongue. Some questions could not be forced. They had to be offered freely, like a wild horse coming to your hand because it chose to, not because it was trapped in September. The heat finally began to ease, and the desert nights turned cool and clear. Lucas had finished breaking the string of Mexican horses and was working on a contract for the Double R Ranch, gentling their new stock for the fall roundup. Sophia still came every morning, and now she sometimes stayed through the afternoon, sitting on an upturned crate in the shade of the barn while Lucas worked. One afternoon, when the shadows were growing long and the light had turned golden, Lucas brought over a bucket and sat down near her. He took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead, and when he looked at her, He could see the outline of her face beneath the veil, though not the details. "Miss Anderson," he said carefully, "may I ask you something?" He saw her stiffen, saw her hands clench in her lap. "What is it?" "Why do you wear that veil?" The silence stretched out so long that he thought she would not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Because I am hideous. Because people cannot bear to look at me. Because I frighten children and make grown men turn away." Lucas felt his chest tighten. "What happened to you?" "There was a fire," she said, and now her voice shook. "2 years ago in Boston. I was visiting a friend and there was a fire. The building was old, the wood dry. I tried to get out, but part of the ceiling collapsed. The burning timbers fell on me. They pulled me out eventually, but by then—" She stopped, and he heard her take a shaky breath. "The doctors did what they could. I survived, but my face, the scars are terrible. I wore no veil at first. I thought I could bear it. But the way people looked at me, the horror in their eyes, I could not endure it. So I made this veil, and I have worn it ever since." Lucas sat very still, letting her words sink in. Then he said, "And you came all the way out here to hide?" "Yes." The word was filled with such desolation that it hurt to hear. "I had a small inheritance from my parents, enough to live on if I am careful. I thought perhaps in a place like this, where people are used to hardship, where everyone has scars of one kind or another, I might find some peace. I thought I could disappear." "You have not disappeared," Lucas said gently. "You are right here, behind a veil, always behind a veil." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her hand where it lay in her lap. She flinched but did not withdraw. Her hand was cold despite the warmth of the afternoon. "May I tell you something, Miss Anderson?" he said. "I have seen many things in my life. I have seen men beaten and broken by this land. I have seen women worn down by grief and hardship. I have seen cruelty and kindness, beauty and ugliness. And I have learned that the worst scars are usually the ones that do not show. The ones on the outside, they just tell a story. They say you survived something. They say you are still here." "You have not seen my face," she whispered. "You do not know how bad it is." "No," he agreed. "I have not seen it, but I would like to if you would let me." She pulled her hand away and stood up abruptly. "No, never, I cannot. I cannot bear for you to look at me that way. You have been kind to me, Mr. Finnegan. You have talked to me like I am a real person, not a ghost or a monster. I could not stand it if that changed." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her black skirts kicking up small clouds of dust. Lucas watched her go, his heart heavy. He had pushed too hard, too fast. He had frightened her, but the next morning she was back at the fence. They did not speak of the veil again for several days. Lucas went back to telling her stories, and Sophia went back to listening, and the easy companionship between them gradually returned. But something had shifted. There was a new awareness between them, a tension that had not been there before. Lucas found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering what she looked like beneath that veil, wondering what it would take to make her trust him enough to show him. In early October, there was trouble at the Double R. A group of cattle rustlers had been operating in the area, running off stock and selling it across the border. The sheriff organized a posse, and Lucas volunteered to go along. He was a good tracker, and his way with horses made him valuable on a chase. They rode out at dawn, 10 men with rifles and grim faces, and they did not return for 5 days. When Lucas finally came back to Deming, exhausted and dirty and nursing a bullet graze on his left arm, the first thing he did was go looking for Sophia. He found her in the churchyard, sitting on a bench beneath a cottonwood tree. She stood up when she saw him, and even through the veil he could sense her relief. "You are hurt," she said, her voice sharp with concern. "It is nothing," Lucas said, though in truth his arm was throbbing and he felt light-headed. Just a scratch. Let me see. Before he could protest, she had taken his arm and was carefully rolling up his sleeve. The wound had been bandaged by the sheriff's wife before they rode out, but the bandage was filthy now and spotted with blood. Sophia made a small sound of distress. "Come with me," she said, and there was a new firmness in her voice. "You need this cleaned and properly dressed." She led him back to the boarding house and up to her room at the end of the hall. It was the first time Lucas had been inside, and he looked around with interest. The room was spare but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, a small table and chair. On the table was a stack of books and a kerosene lamp. The window looked out over the main street. Sophia gestured for him to sit in the chair. Then she went to the dresser and pulled out a clean cloth and a bottle of carbolic acid. She worked in silence, carefully removing the dirty bandage, cleaning the wound with steady hands, applying a fresh dressing. Lucas watched her face, or rather the veil that covered it, and he could sense her concentration, her competence. These were not the hands of someone who was helpless or broken. These were the hands of someone who knew how to take care of things. "You are good at this," he said quietly. "I learned," she said. "After the fire, I spent months being cared for by doctors and nurses. I watched everything they did. I thought perhaps I might become a nurse myself, find some way to be useful. But then I realized no patient would want to be cared for by someone who looked like me. No hospital would hire me." "That is their loss," Lucas said. She finished tying off the bandage and stepped back. For a moment, they just looked at each other, or at least Lucas looked at her while she looked at him through the veil. The late afternoon light slanted through the window, turning the dust motes into gold. The room was very quiet. "I was worried about you," Sophia said suddenly. "When you did not come to the corral when I heard about the posse riding out after rustlers, I was afraid something terrible had happened. I realized that She stopped, as if catching herself before saying too much. "You what?" Lucas asked gently. "I realized that I have come to care about you," she whispered. "That you have become important to me. That the thought of you being hurt or killed made me feel things I have not let myself feel in a very long time." Lucas stood up slowly, mindful of his arm. He took a step toward her and then another, until he was standing close enough that he could have reached out and touched her. The veil hung between them like a curtain, like a wall. "Miss Anderson," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Sophia, I have come to care about you too. More than I probably should. More than is wise, given that I am just a drifter with nothing to offer but a strong back and a way with horses. But I cannot help it. I think about you all the time. I wonder what you are doing, what you are thinking. I want to know everything about you. And I want you to know that I do not care what is under that veil. I do not care about scars or burns or anything else. I care about you, the person you are. The woman who watches horses in the morning and reads books in the evening and patches up wounded cowboys without hesitation." He saw her hands come up to her throat, saw them tremble. "You cannot mean that. You cannot possibly mean that." "I do," he said simply. "And I will prove it to you if you let me." Very slowly, giving her every chance to stop him, Lucas reached up and took the edge of the black veil in his fingers. He could feel her shaking, could hear the quick, frightened sound of her breathing. But she did not step away. She did not tell him no. "May I?" he whispered. For a long, trembling moment, she did not answer. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she said, "Yes." Lucas lifted the veil gently, raising it up and away from her face. And for the first time since she had arrived in Deming, he saw Sophia Anderson as she truly was. The left side of her face was indeed badly scarred. The skin was puckered and discolored, pink and white and shiny where it had been burned and healed. The scars ran from her cheekbone down to her jaw, and he could see that they continued down her neck and disappeared beneath the high collar of her dress. Her left ear was partially gone, just a small remnant remaining. Her hair on that side was thin and patchy where it had been burned away and never fully grown back, but the right side of her face was untouched, and it was beautiful. Her eye was a deep, warm brown. Her skin was pale and smooth. Her cheekbone was high and elegant. Her lips were full and soft. Her nose was straight and fine. And even the scarred side, when he looked at it with clear eyes, was not hideous. It was just damaged. It told the story of pain endured, of survival against odds, of a woman who had been through fire and come out the other side. Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, taking in every detail. And then he said with absolute sincerity, "You are beautiful." Sophia made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. Tears spilled down her cheeks, running over both the smooth skin and the scarred. "You are lying. You are just being kind." "I am not," Lucas said firmly. He reached up with both hands and cupped her face gently, his palms warm against her skin. "You are beautiful, Sophia. Not in spite of the scars, not if I ignore the scars, but just beautiful, period. I see a woman who survived something terrible. I see strength and courage. I see someone who kept going even when she had every reason to give up. That is beautiful. You are beautiful." She was crying in earnest now, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Lucas pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, being careful of his wounded arm, and he held her while she cried out all the fear and pain and loneliness she had been carrying for 2 long years. He stroked her hair and murmured soft words and let her soak the front of his shirt with tears. When the storm finally passed, Sophia pulled back and looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to fall apart like that." "You are allowed to fall apart," Lucas said. "You have been holding yourself together for too long." She touched her face, her fingers tracing the scars as if she had forgotten what they felt like. "I have not let anyone see me in 2 years, not without the veil. I was so afraid. And now I am still afraid," she admitted, "but less so, because you looked at me and you did not turn away. You did not flinch or recoil, you just saw me." "I see you," Lucas agreed, "and I like what I see." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle as a breath. Then he kissed her right cheek, and then, very deliberately, he kissed her left cheek, his lips pressing against the scarred skin with the same tenderness. Sophia made a small, broken sound and clutched at his shirt. "Lucas," she whispered, and his name in her mouth sounded like a prayer. "I am here," he said. "I am not going anywhere." That evening they walked together through the town, and for the first time since arriving in Deming, Sophia did not wear her veil. She kept her chin up and her shoulders back, even though Lucas could feel her trembling beside him. People stared, of course. Children pointed and whispered. A few women gasped and turned away. But Lucas kept his hand on the small of Sophia's back, steady and sure, and he nodded politely to everyone they passed as if there was nothing unusual at all. When they reached the edge of town, where the desert opened up wild and vast before them, Sophia stopped and took a deep, shuddering breath. "They were all staring," she said. "Let them stare," Lucas said. "They will get used to it, and even if they do not, it does not matter. What matters is that you are here, living your life, not hiding away." "It is hard," she whispered. "I know. But you do not have to do it alone. I will be with you if you want me." She turned to face him, and in the golden light of the setting sun, with the desert wind lifting her hair, she looked fierce and strong and, yes, beautiful. "I want you," she said. "I want you more than I have ever wanted anything." Lucas kissed her then, a real kiss this time, his lips finding hers in the fading light. She tasted like salt from her tears and something sweet that was just her. She kissed him back with a hunger that matched his own, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, and for a long, perfect moment, the rest of the world fell away. Over the following months, Lucas and Sophia became a familiar sight in Deming. They walked together in the evenings, sat together at church on Sundays, had dinner together at the boarding house where Mrs. Chen watched them with approving eyes. Lucas continued to work with horses, and Sophia began to find ways to make herself useful in the community. She discovered that while people might be uncomfortable with her appearance at first, they quickly forgot about it when she proved herself capable and kind. She helped Mrs. Chen with the cooking and cleaning at the boarding house. She volunteered at the church, mending vestments and arranging flowers. She even began assisting Doc Crawford, the town physician, who was old and overworked and grateful for an extra pair of steady hands. "You have a gift for this," Doc Crawford told her one afternoon as she helped him set a broken arm on a miner who had fallen down a shaft. "Ever thought about studying medicine properly?" Sophia laughed, a sound that Lucas loved to hear. "I doubt any medical school would take me." "Times are changing," Doc Crawford said thoughtfully. "Women are being admitted to medical schools back east now. Not many and not easily, but it is happening. And out here in the territories, we take our doctors where we can find them. If you wanted to learn, I would teach you what I know." Sophia looked at Lucas, who was waiting outside the doctor's office. He grinned and nodded encouragingly. "You should do it," he said. "You would be wonderful at it." So Sophia became Doc Crawford's apprentice, learning anatomy and pharmacology, how to stitch wounds and deliver babies, how to diagnose illness and treat injury. She had a natural aptitude for it, and she threw herself into the work with an intensity that spoke of years of feeling useless and uncertain. Now she had purpose. Now she had direction. In December, the first snow fell on Deming, a light dusting that melted by midday but left the air clean and crisp. Lucas had saved enough money to rent a small house on the outskirts of town, a 2-room adobe with a corral out back where he could keep his own horses. He worked for himself now, taking contracts from various ranches and building a reputation as the best horse breaker in southern New Mexico. One evening, as they sat by the fire in his new house, Lucas took Sophia's hand and said, "Marry me." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes wide. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "I know I am not rich. I know I cannot offer you a fancy life or a big house in the city, but I can offer you my heart and my hands and every day we have together. I love you, Sophia. I have loved you since the first moment I saw you standing by that fence, hidden behind your veil, and I will love you for the rest of my life if you will let me." Sophia was crying again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Lucas. You gave me back my life. You made me see that I could still have joy and purpose and love. You saw me when I was invisible. Yes, I will marry you." They were married in January of 1883 in the small church in Deming with half the town in attendance. Sophia wore a white dress that Mrs. Chen had sewn for her, simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a high neck that covered most of her scars. But she did not wear a veil. She walked down the aisle with her face bare, her head high, and when she reached Lucas at the altar, he thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Doc Crawford gave her away, and Mrs. Chen cried happy tears, and the preacher spoke about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. When Lucas kissed his bride, the whole congregation applauded, and for the first time in years, Sophia felt truly, completely happy. They moved into the small adobe house together, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas worked with his horses, building his business and his reputation. Sophia continued her medical training with Doc Crawford, and she began seeing patients of her own, especially women and children who felt more comfortable with her gentle manner. The scars that had once made people turn away became a sign of her strength and resilience. Mothers told their daughters, "If Miss Sophia could survive that fire and still be kind and good, then you can be brave about your own troubles." In the spring, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure, afraid that the baby might inherit her scars, afraid that she might not be a good mother, afraid of a dozen things that Lucas patiently talked her through one by one. "Our baby will be perfect," he told her, his hand on her still flat belly. "And even if they have scars or difficulties or challenges, we will love them and raise them and teach them that they are valuable exactly as they are, just like I did with you." "You did not raise me," Sophia protested, laughing through her tears. "Did I not?" Lucas teased. "You were pretty wild when I met you. I had to gentle you like one of my horses." She swatted his arm, but she was smiling. "I was not wild, I was frightened. And now I am just in love," she said and kissed him. Their daughter was born in November of 1883, during a cold snap that frosted the windows and made the desert floor glitter like it was covered in diamonds. The labor was long and hard, but Doc Crawford was there, and Sophia's medical training helped her stay calm even in the midst of pain. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, Lucas wept with relief and joy. They named her Lucas Finnegan, and she had her mother's brown eyes and her father's dark hair and no scars at all. Sophia held her daughter and marveled at the tiny fingers, the rosebud mouth, the impossibly soft skin. "She is perfect," she whispered. "Like her mother," Lucas said, and Sophia did not argue. Raising Lily was both exhausting and exhilarating. Lucas proved to be a natural father, patient and playful, always ready to scoop his daughter up and make her laugh. Sophia discovered reserves of strength and love she had not known she possessed. They took turns walking Lily when she cried in the night, took turns changing her and feeding her and singing to her. The small adobe house was filled with the sounds of family, with laughter and love and the ordinary chaos of daily life. In the summer of 1884, Doc Crawford fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and within months it had progressed to something far more serious. By August, he was bedridden, and Sophia was running his practice almost entirely on her own. It was daunting and terrifying, but she found that the townspeople trusted her. They came to her with their illnesses and injuries, and she treated them with the same skill and compassion that Doc Crawford had shown her. When Doc Crawford died in September, the whole town mourned. But at the reading of his will, everyone was surprised to learn that he had left his practice, his medical books, and his instruments to Sophia. "She has earned it," the will stated. "She is a fine physician, better than I ever was, and she will serve this community well." Sophia was overwhelmed. "I am not a real doctor," she protested to Lucas. "I never went to medical school. I never got a degree." "You are as real a doctor as anyone I have ever met," Lucas said firmly. "You have the knowledge, the skill, and the heart for it. Doc Crawford knew that. The town knows that. Now you just have to believe it yourself." So Sophia became the doctor for Deming and the surrounding ranches. She treated broken bones and fevers, delivered babies and stitched wounds, diagnosed illnesses and dispensed medicines. She worked long hours, often being called out in the middle of the night to ride to some distant ranch where someone was sick or hurt. Lucas supported her completely, taking care of Lily when Sophia had to work, never complaining about the disrupted schedule or the missed meals. As Lily grew, she became a bright, curious child who adored both her parents. She loved to watch her father work with the horses, sitting on the corral fence exactly as her mother had done years before. She loved to follow her mother around, playing doctor with her dolls, asking endless questions about how bodies worked and how to help people feel better. When Lily was 3 years old, she asked her mother about the scars. They were sitting together on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple, and Lily reached up and touched Sophia's face with her small hand. "Mama, what happened to your face?" Sophia had known this question was coming, but it still made her heart clench. She took a breath and said, "There was a fire, sweetheart. When I was younger, before I met your father, I got hurt, and the scars are what is left from that hurt." "Does it hurt now?" "No, not anymore." Lily considered this seriously. Then she leaned forward and kissed her mother's scarred cheek exactly as Lucas had done years before. "There," she said. "Now it is all better." Sophia gathered her daughter close and held her tight, overcome with emotion. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "Now it is all better." The years passed in a golden blur of work and family and love. Lucas's horse-breaking business thrived, and he began buying land, building up a small ranch of his own. Sophia's medical practice grew, and she became known throughout southern New Mexico as a skilled and compassionate physician. They had 2 more children, a son they named Levi in 1886 and another daughter, Mara, in 1889. The adobe house was expanded to accommodate the growing family, with more rooms and a bigger corral and a garden where Sophia grew herbs for her medicines. Deming itself was changing too. The town was growing, becoming more settled and prosperous. The railroad brought new people and new opportunities. Schools were built, churches established, businesses opened. The rough frontier town that Sophia had first arrived in was gradually becoming a real community. In 1890, on their 7th wedding anniversary, Lucas gave Sophia a gift. It was a small wooden box, beautifully carved, and inside was a piece of black silk. Sophia looked at it, confused, and then she realized what it was. It was the veil she had worn when she first came to Deming, the veil that had hidden her face for so long. "I kept it," Lucas said quietly. "I wanted you to have it, not to wear, but to remember how far you have come, to remember that you were brave enough to take it off." Sophia held the veil in her hands, feeling the soft fabric. It seemed like a relic from another life, from a different person entirely. The frightened, broken woman who had hidden behind this veil was gone. In her place was someone strong and confident, a wife and mother and doctor, someone who had built a good life out of the ashes of tragedy. "Thank you," she said to Lucas, and she folded the veil carefully and put it back in the box. She would keep it, but she would never wear it again. She did not need to hide anymore. By the mid-1890s, the Finnegan family was one of the most respected in Deming. Lucas's ranch was thriving, with a string of fine horses that were in demand throughout the territory. Sophia's medical practice was busier than ever, and she had taken on an apprentice of her own, a young woman from El Paso who wanted to learn medicine. The children were growing up healthy and happy, Lily already talking about becoming a doctor like her mother, Levi fascinated by horses like his father, and little Mara charming everyone she met with her infectious laugh. In 1897, New Mexico was still a territory, not yet a state, but the talk of statehood was everywhere. There was a sense of possibility in the air, a feeling that the wild frontier days were ending and something new was beginning. Lucas and Sophia had been part of that transformation. They had helped build a community, had raised a family, had made a life worth living. One evening in late summer, they sat together on their porch, watching the sun set over the desert. The children were inside, doing their homework and arguing over something trivial. The horses were in the corral, peaceful and content. The air was warm and still, carrying the scent of sage and dust. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked suddenly. "Leaving Boston, coming out here, taking a chance on a rough cowboy with no prospects?" Sophia looked at him, this man who had seen her at her lowest point and chosen to love her anyway. His face was more weathered now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun, silver threading through his dark hair. But his eyes were the same, still gray and clear and kind. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You gave me back my life, Lucas. You made me see that I was more than my scars. You loved me when I could not love myself. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Good," Lucas said, and he took her hand in his. "Because I would too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky. In the house behind them, Lily called out that dinner was ready. Lucas stood and offered Sophia his hand, pulling her to her feet. As they walked inside together, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fire that had scarred her, the courage it had taken to leave Boston, the fear she had felt when she first arrived in Deming, the black veil that had been both her protection and her prison. And then she thought about the moment when Lucas had lifted that veil, gently and without hesitation, and had seen only beauty. That moment had changed everything. It had given her the courage to live again, to love again, to believe that she could be more than her worst moment. As they joined their children around the dinner table, as Lily chattered about her day and Levi showed off a drawing he had made and Mara demanded more potatoes, Sophia felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned. It had turned out so much better. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. In 1898, when Lily was 15, she announced that she wanted to attend medical school back east. Sophia was both proud and terrified, remembering her own time in Boston, remembering the prejudice she had faced. But Lily was determined, and she had her mother's strength and her father's steadiness. "Let her go," Lucas said when Sophia expressed her concerns. "Let her chase her dreams. We raised her to be brave. Now we have to trust that." So Lily left for medical school in Philadelphia, and the house felt emptier without her. But she wrote letters every week, full of excitement about her studies, about the new things she was learning, about the future she was building. And Sophia realized that this was what parenting was about. Not holding on, but letting go. Not keeping your children safe and small, but giving them wings and watching them fly. Levi, at 12, was already a skilled horseman, learning everything he could from his father. He had a natural affinity for the animals, just as Lucas did, and he dreamed of expanding the ranch, of breeding the finest horses in the territory. Lucas taught him everything he knew, passing down the lessons that old Vaquero had taught him years ago, the patience and respect that made all the difference. Mara, at 8, was the wild card. She was not interested in medicine or horses. She loved books and stories, and she wanted to be a teacher. She was constantly organizing the other children in town into makeshift classrooms, assigning them lessons and grading their work with a seriousness that was both endearing and amusing. "We have raised 3 very different children," Sophia mused one evening. "And they are all perfect," Lucas said contentedly. In 1900, as the new century dawned, there was a sense of optimism throughout the territory. New Mexico was on the cusp of statehood. The railroad had brought prosperity. Towns were growing, schools and churches multiplying. The wild frontier was being tamed, though it still retained its rugged beauty and independent spirit. Lucas and Sophia celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary quietly, with just the 2 of them. The children were all occupied elsewhere, Lily away at school, Levi spending the night at a friend's ranch, Mara at a sleepover in town. It was rare to have the house to themselves, and they savored the quiet. 17 years, Sophia said, leaning against Lucas as they sat on the porch. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I still remember the first time I saw you, Lucas said. Stepping off that stage hidden behind that black veil, I remember thinking there was a story there. I wanted to know it. And now you know it, Sophia said. Now I am part of it, Lucas corrected. We wrote the rest of it together. Sophia turned and kissed him, a long, sweet kiss that held 17 years of love and partnership. And we are not done yet, she said. We have plenty more chapters to write. The first decade of the new century brought more changes. Lily graduated from medical school in 1903 and returned to New Mexico, setting up her own practice in Las Cruces. She wrote to her mother often, seeking advice and sharing stories, and Sophia felt a deep pride in her daughter's accomplishments. Lily had done what Sophia herself had never been able to do, had claimed her place in the medical profession with credentials and degrees. But she had done it because her mother had shown her it was possible, had demonstrated through her own life that scars and obstacles could be overcome. Levy married in 1905, a pretty rancher's daughter named Emma who shared his love of horses. They built a house on the far corner of Lucas's land and began raising their own family. By 1907, they had given Lucas and Sophia their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas who had his grandfather's gray eyes. Mara finished her education and became a teacher in Deming, taking over the schoolhouse when the previous teacher retired. She was beloved by her students, known for making learning fun and encouraging even the most reluctant scholars. She remained unmarried, declaring that she was too busy with her work to bother with romance, though Sophia suspected there was a shy surveyor in town who hoped to change her mind eventually. As Lucas and Sophia entered their 40s, they found themselves becoming elders of the community. People came to them for advice, for wisdom, for the perspective that only years of living could provide. Lucas was on the town council, helping to make decisions about schools and roads and water rights. Sophia continued her medical practice, though she had taken on 2 more apprentices to help with the workload. In 1910, they celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary, and Lucas surprised Sophia with a trip. They took the train to San Francisco, staying in a hotel and seeing the city that had been rebuilt after the great earthquake of 1906. It was Sophia's first real vacation in years, and she delighted in the theaters and restaurants, the museums and parks. But after a week, she was ready to go home. I miss the desert, she admitted as the train carried them back toward New Mexico. I miss the wide open spaces and the clear air. I missed our life. That is because we built a good life, Lucas said, one worth missing. When they returned to Deming, they found that Mara had finally accepted the surveyor's proposal. There was a wedding to plan, and Sophia threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm. The wedding took place in October, a beautiful ceremony under the vast blue sky, with the whole town in attendance. As Sophia watched her youngest daughter dance with her new husband, she thought about how far she had come from the terrified woman who had arrived in this town nearly 30 years ago. The second decade of the century brought more grandchildren. Lily, who had married a fellow doctor in Las Cruces, had twins in 1912. Levy and Emma had 3 more children by 1915. Mara and her surveyor husband, whose name was Peter, had a daughter in 1913 and a son in 1916. The adobe house that had once been so quiet was now filled with visiting grandchildren, their laughter echoing off the walls, their energy both exhausting and invigorating. Lucas scaled back his work with the horses, letting Levy take over more of the business. He still went out to the corral most mornings, still gentled the difficult ones that no one else could handle, but he moved a little slower now, with a hitch in his step from an old injury. He was content to spend more time on the porch, watching the grandchildren play, telling them stories about the old days. Sophia continued to practice medicine, though she too had slowed down. She saw patients in the mornings and spent her afternoons with her books and her garden. She had trained a generation of medical practitioners, men and women who carried on her legacy throughout southern New Mexico. When people spoke of Doc Sophia, it was with respect and affection, remembering how she had helped them through childbirth or illness, how she had saved a life or eased suffering. In 1917, when America entered the Great War, both of Lily's twin sons enlisted. It was a difficult time, filled with worry and fear. Sophia wrote letters to her grandsons every week, sending them packages of socks and cookies, telling them about life back home. When they returned in 1919, both safe though one limped from a shrapnel wound, there was a huge celebration. The whole family gathered at the ranch, 3 generations together, grateful for the blessing of survival. New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, and Lucas and Sophia watched their adopted home transform into something new while still retaining its essential character. The desert was still vast and beautiful. The mountains still rose purple on the horizon, but now there were better roads and more schools, and a sense of permanence that had not existed in the old frontier days. In the early 1920s, as Lucas and Sophia entered their 60s, they began to think about their legacy. They had built a good life, raised good children, contributed to their community. But there was one more thing Sophia wanted to do. She began writing a book, a memoir of sorts, about her experiences. She wrote about the fire in Boston, about the long recovery, about the decision to hide behind a veil. She wrote about the journey west, about arriving in Deming, about the cowboy who had seen past her scars to the woman beneath. She wrote about building a medical practice, about raising a family, about finding joy and purpose after tragedy. It took her 3 years to finish, writing in the evenings after her work was done, filling page after page with her careful handwriting. When it was complete, she showed it to Lucas. "I thought perhaps it might help someone," she said. "Someone who is going through their own tragedy, someone who thinks their life is over because of how they look or what happened to them. I wanted them to know that there can be beauty after pain, that there can be love after loss." Lucas read the manuscript carefully, and when he finished, there were tears in his eyes. "It is beautiful," he said, "just like you." Sophia sent the manuscript to a publisher in New York, not expecting much, but to her surprise they accepted it. The book was published in 1925 under the title Behind the Veil, a story of survival and love in the American West. It did not become a bestseller, but it sold steadily, and Sophia received letters from readers across the country, people who told her that her story had inspired them, had given them courage, had helped them see that they were not alone. "You are famous," Lucas teased, waving one of the letters. "I am not famous," Sophia protested. "I am just someone who wrote down what happened." "You are someone who gave people hope," Lucas corrected. "That is better than famous." In 1927, they celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary. It was a grand affair, with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. There were dozens of people, multiple generations, all connected by the love that Lucas and Sophia had built. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and retold. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Lucas took Sophia's hand and led her away from the crowd. They walked out to the corral, the same corral where she had first stood watching him work all those years ago. "This is where it started," Lucas said softly. "Right here. You standing at that fence, me working with the horses. I fell in love with you that first week, though I did not admit it to myself for a while longer." "I fell in love with you too," Sophia said. "You were so patient with the horses. So gentle. I thought if someone could be that kind to animals, perhaps they could be kind to a scarred woman too." "You were never just a scarred woman," Lucas said. "You were always so much more. You were brilliant and brave and beautiful. You just needed someone to help you see it." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. They had been through so much together. The early days of courtship, the joy of marriage, the challenges of raising children, the sorrows and triumphs that came with any long life. And through it all they had held onto each other. "I am glad it was you," she said quietly. "I am glad you were the one who lifted my veil. I am glad you were the one who saw me." "I will always see you," Lucas promised. "Always." They stood together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life filled with love and meaning and purpose. Behind them, the party continued, their family laughing and celebrating. Before them, the desert stretched out endlessly, beautiful and harsh and home. The years that followed were gentler, quieter. Lucas and Sophia spent their days together, enjoying the simple pleasures of long marriage. They walked in the mornings when the air was cool. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset. They visited their children and grandchildren, delighting in the growing number of great-grandchildren who called them Granny and Gramps. In 1930, when Lucas was 71 and Sophia was 69, they went on one last adventure. They took the train all the way to California to see the Pacific Ocean. Sophia had never seen the ocean, and Lucas wanted to give her that experience. They stood on the beach in San Diego, watching the waves roll in, and Sophia marveled at the vastness of it, at the endless blue stretching to the horizon. "It is beautiful," she said, "but I still prefer the desert." Lucas laughed and wrapped his arm around her. "That is because you are a desert woman now. The land has gotten into your bones." They returned to Deming, to the house they had lived in for nearly 50 years, to the life they had built, and they were content. In the spring of 1933, Lucas fell ill. It started as a cough, much like Doc Crawford's had all those years ago, and despite Sophia's best efforts, it progressed rapidly. By summer, he was confined to bed, and Sophia knew with the certainty of a trained physician that he was dying. She sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand, talking to him, reminding him of all the good years they had shared. The children came, and the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren, all of them crowding into the small house to say goodbye. Lucas smiled at them all, his voice weak but his spirit still strong. On a warm evening in August, with Sophia sitting beside him and the window open to let in the desert air, Lucas took his last breath. He went peacefully, a slight smile on his face, his hand in Sophia's. Sophia sat for a long time, holding his hand even after it grew cold, unable to let go. This man had been her salvation, her love, her partner for 50 years. He had seen her when she was invisible. He had loved her when she thought she was unlovable. He had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. The funeral was huge, with people coming from all over New Mexico to pay their respects. Lucas Finnegan had been a good man, a respected rancher, a kind neighbor, a beloved husband and father and grandfather. The church could not hold everyone who wanted to attend, so they held the service outside, under the vast blue sky that Lucas had loved. After the funeral, after all the visitors had left, Sophia went through Lucas's things. She found letters she had written him during their courtship, carefully preserved. She found drawings that their children had made when they were small. She found the carved wooden box that held her black veil, and beside it, a note in Lucas's handwriting. "To my beautiful wife," the note said. "You took off this veil and stepped into the light. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. Thank you for the best 50 years of my life. I love you, always. Lucas." Sophia wept then, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the very core of her being. She had known this day would come eventually, had known that one of them would have to go on without the other. But knowing it did not make it easier. In the months that followed, Sophia struggled with grief. She had lost her partner, her best friend, the person who knew her better than anyone else in the world. She went through the motions of living, seeing patients, spending time with her family, but there was a hollowness inside her that nothing could fill. It was Lily who finally broke through. She came to visit one afternoon and found her mother sitting on the porch, staring out at the corral where Lucas had worked so many years ago. "Mama," Lily said gently, sitting down beside her, "you are grieving. That is natural, but Papa would not want you to stop living. He would want you to keep going, to find joy again." "How can I find joy without him?" Sophia whispered. "The same way he helped you find joy after the fire," Lily said. "By remembering that you are still here, that you still have purpose, that you still have people who love you and need you." Slowly, painfully, Sophia began to heal. She threw herself back into her work, taking on more patients, training more apprentices. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been. She wrote letters to the readers of her book, offering comfort and encouragement to those who were struggling. And gradually, she discovered that Lily was right. There could be joy after loss. It was a different kind of joy, quieter and more bittersweet, but it was real. She could remember Lucas without falling apart. She could laugh at old memories without crying. She could live without him, even though she missed him every single day. In 1938, at the age of 77, Sophia published a second book. This one was called After the Veil, A Life of Love and Service. It was about her years with Lucas, about building a medical practice, about raising a family, about finding meaning and purpose in service to others. It was a love letter to the life they had built together, and a testament to the power of choosing to live fully despite pain and loss. The book was more successful than her first, and Sophia received even more letters from readers. She corresponded with dozens of people, offering advice and support, sharing her own experiences of survival and resilience. She became a sort of wise woman, a grandmother figure not just to her own family, but to countless others who found hope in her story. In the early 1940s, as the world plunged into another terrible war, Sophia did what she could to help. She volunteered at the hospital in Deming, treating the wounded soldiers who came through on their way to or from the front. She wrote letters to servicemen overseas, offering encouragement and a connection to home. She donated money to war relief efforts, using the proceeds from her books to help those in need. Through it all, she kept living. She kept serving. She kept finding ways to make a difference. In 1945, when the war finally ended, Sophia was 84 years old. She was still sharp and active, though she had finally retired from active medical practice. She spent her days reading, writing letters, and enjoying her family. She had dozens of grandchildren and great-grandchildren now, several great-great-grandchildren, a whole tribe descended from her and Lucas. On a warm evening in May, Sophia sat on her porch watching the sunset. The desert was blooming after a rare spring rain, and the air was sweet with the scent of sage and wildflowers. She thought about her life, about the long journey from Boston to Deming, about the fire that had scarred her and the cowboy who had loved her anyway. She thought about the black veil she had worn, how it had been both her shield and her prison. She thought about the moment Lucas had lifted it, his gray eyes steady and kind, his voice gentle as he told her she was beautiful. That moment had been the turning point, the instant when her life had split into before and after. Sophia reached up and touched her face, feeling the familiar texture of the scars. They were softer now, faded by time but still visible. She had never tried to hide them again after that day with Lucas. She had worn them openly, a testament to what she had survived, what she had overcome, and she had lived a good life, a full life, a life filled with love and work and purpose. She had been a wife and mother, a doctor and healer, a friend and mentor. She had raised children who were making their own mark on the world. She had helped countless patients, trained dozens of medical practitioners, inspired thousands of readers with her books. Most importantly, she had loved and been loved. Lucas had seen her, truly seen her, and he had chosen to love her anyway. That love had sustained her through all the years that followed, through challenges and triumphs, through joy and sorrow. And even now, more than a decade after his death, she could still feel him beside her, his presence woven into the very fabric of her life. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sophia smiled. She had no regrets. She had lived well. She had loved deeply. And when her time came, whenever that might be, she would go peacefully, knowing that she had made the most of the second chance Lucas had given her. Sophia lived for another 10 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1955 at the age of 94. She was surrounded by family at the end. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren all gathered to say goodbye. She was laid to rest beside Lucas in the cemetery in Deming, under the vast blue sky they had both loved. At her funeral, Lily stood and told the story of how her parents had met, of the cowboy who had seen past the scars to the woman beneath, of the love that had sustained them through 50 years of marriage. She spoke of her mother's courage and strength, of her service to the community, of the legacy she had left behind. "My mother taught us that beauty is not about how you look," Lily said. "It is about who you are, what you do, how you love. She taught us that scars do not define you. They are just part of your story, and she taught us that it is never too late to start over, to find love, to build a life worth living." The cemetery was packed with people who had come to pay their respects. Patients Sophia had treated, students she had taught, readers of her books, friends and neighbors and family. They all had their own stories of how Sophia had touched their lives, how she had helped them, how she had inspired them. And as they lowered her casket into the ground beside Lucas's, the assembled crowd sang a hymn, their voices rising into the clear desert air. It was a celebration of a life well lived, a tribute to a woman who had faced unimaginable pain and had chosen not just to survive, but to thrive. In the years that followed, Sophia's books continued to be read, passing down through generations as a testament to the power of love and resilience. Medical students studied her contributions to frontier medicine. Historians wrote about her role in developing healthcare in southern New Mexico. But more than anything, she was remembered as the woman who had hidden behind a black veil and had found the courage to step into the light. And always, she was remembered alongside Lucas, the cowboy who had lifted that veil gently and had seen only beauty. Their love story became legend in Deming, told and retold, a reminder that true love sees past surface appearances to the soul beneath. That compassion and kindness can heal even the deepest wounds, that everyone deserves to be seen, to be loved, to be valued exactly as they are. The adobe house where they had lived and loved and raised their family still stands on the outskirts of Deming, now preserved as a historical site. Visitors come from all over to see where the famous doctor Sophia Anderson Finnegan lived and worked. They see the corral where Lucas broke horses, the room where Sophia treated patients, the porch where they sat together in the evenings watching the sunset. But more than the physical space, what endures is the story itself. The story of two people who found each other against all odds. The story of a woman who learned to see her own beauty through the eyes of someone who loved her. The story of a man who looked past scars to see the extraordinary person beneath. It is a love story, yes, but it is also a story about courage and resilience and the human capacity for growth and change. It is about the power of one moment, one choice, one act of compassion to transform a life. It is about building something meaningful out of pain and loss, about creating beauty in unexpected places, about finding home not in a location, but in the presence of the person you love. And every time someone reads Sophia's books, every time someone visits that adobe house in Deming, every time someone tells the story of the veiled woman and the cowboy who loved her, Lucas and Sophia live again. Their love echoes across time, a testament to what is possible when we choose to see each other truly, when we love without conditions, when we believe in the beauty that exists in every soul. The desert around Deming still stretches out vast and beautiful. The mountains still rise purple on the horizon, and somewhere in the wind that whispers through the sage, you can almost hear Lucas's voice telling Sophia she is beautiful, and Sophia's soft laugh in response, and the sound of their grandchildren playing, and the whole chorus of a life lived fully and well. That is the legacy they left behind. Not just children and grandchildren and medical practices and broken horses and published books, but a story that reminds us all that we are more than our worst moments, that we can rise from the ashes, that we can love and be loved, that we can take off our veils and step into the light, and that sometimes, when we are lucky, someone will see us truly, will lift away whatever we use to hide ourselves, and will tell us with absolute sincerity that we are beautiful, that we are valued, that we are enough, exactly as we are. That was Lucas's gift to Sophia. And Sophia's gift to Lucas was believing him, trusting him, letting him love her. Together, they created something extraordinary from something broken. Together, they proved that love can heal, that beauty comes in many forms, and that the scars we carry do not diminish us but instead tell the story of our strength in the end. That is what matters. Not perfection but authenticity. Not hiding but revealing. Not fear but courage. Not isolation but connection. Not despair but hope. These are the things that Lucas and Sophia embodied, the lessons they taught through the way they lived their lives. And so their story continues, passed down through generations, inspiring others to be brave, to love deeply, to see the beauty in themselves and others. It is a story that began with a black veil and a cowboy's gentle hands, but it grew into something much larger, something that touches everyone who hears it. Because ultimately, we all have our veils. We all have things we hide, scars we carry, fears that keep us from being fully seen. And we all need someone who will look past those defenses, who will see us truly, who will love us not despite our flaws but as a complete person, scars and all. Lucas and Sophia found that in each other. And in doing so, they created a love story for the ages, one that continues to inspire and encourage more than a century after they first met in that dusty town in New Mexico. Their love was real and honest and true, and it made all the difference.